Hello and welcome to the Petricated Swashbuckler. Today we are changing some old plans and making some new ones. The Victorian Ball in Bath is no longer happening for me. I'm generally quite chill with plans being changed and my plans being a little bit fluid. I like to have plans, preferably 10 years in advance, but I also like to be able to change them up when they're not working for me. And I also find pleasure in looking forward to things even when they don't happen. And I also find pleasure in okay, but that's not happening. That means I can get on to the next project. And my next project is the 1920s. So this summer I'm organising an event, a live action role play that's set in the 1920s. It's set in 1929. The setting is a English aristocratic family hunting lodge, and the son of the lord of the manor has brought all his friends, and they'll have a party for 2 weeks and go shooting and all that jazz. Quite literally, there'll be quite a lot of jazz. And when I started researching this period, I knew very little about it. I knew very little about the 1920s. I knew a little bit about the politics. Very little about the fashion of the era. But apart from the extreme drop-waisted dresses, I've kind of thought of the 1920s as a sort of very luxurious, very glamorous period. Lots of glitz, lots of luxurious gowns with pearls and silk fringe and sequins, and just very ostentatious and glamorous and luxurious and lovely. Which it was. I mean, it was very much like the last era of the super rich and the super poor in England. However, I won't be portraying one of the upper class people. I'll be portraying a domestic servant. So I'll need to find out what she's going to be wearing. And that's where I thought I'd take you along with me and make a little bit of a sort of tentative plan. Now, as a working class person and a domestic servant, she wouldn't have that much to spend on clothing. As far as I could tell, the kind of normal yearly wage of a domestic servant, that's not the housekeeper or the cook, but not the scullery maid either, but sort of in the upper middle levels of domestic servantness. The average yearly pay was £20. But funnily enough, I also found a budget for the late 1920s, early 1930s, for how to survive on £18 a week. So a lower middle upper working class person was supposed to live on almost the same amount of money every week as a domestic servant was paid every year. Now, of course, there's a lot of expenses that a domestic servant doesn't have. As a live-in servant, you don't have to pay rent, and you didn't have to pay for your food. You were fed and sometimes clothed. Quite a lot of domestic servants were provided with uniforms. But there's still not a lot of money. You would also possibly receive some tips. I feel like I hear a lot about tipping culture as being a very American thing, and also quite a modern thing, and a sort of people are horrified that you have to depend on tips to make a living, which I totally agree with, by the way. I think you should be paid a living wage, and then the tips should just be the kind of icing on the cake. But this was also very common in the 1920s for domestic servants, and before that you did receive tips from people visiting the houses. So say that I'm an aristocratic lady, and I'm visiting my friend's house to stay there for a couple of weeks. When I leave, I'll be tipping If I've had the services of a lady's maid, then I might be tipping her for helping me like fix my hair. If one of the footmen carried my luggage, then I might tip him. I might tip the cook for the great food. I might tip the parlour maid who's been kind of cleaning and tidying my room. Of course, the tips usually went to the servants who were the most visible, and that was mostly the footmen, the male domestic servants who was sometimes mostly like hired because they were really hot, but who did a lot of the kind of serving and carrying and following to the carriage or the car, that sort of thing. So £20 a year, and then maybe some tips. This is my cat sneezing. This doesn't work, does it? Sorry, we need to have the cat in the frame, otherwise he's really grumpy and angry with me. So £20 a year plus a little bit of tips is not an awful lot. And even if my character were to save all her money, not spend anything on leisure or clothing or anything, just wear the uniform, she'd still need underwear. And so because I usually like to start from the skin and work my way outwards, that's also where I'm going to start. And I thought I'd make you some quick sketches just to show you what I've been thinking about. So first of all, I needed some sort of underwear layer. There were a lot of different options in the period, but I've chosen to go with what I've seen called called combinations. Envelope chemise, step-in chemise. It's just a very, very simple, like long camisole that closes between the legs, so it does multiple things. It's both kind of a chemise and underpants, and I thought that was just perfect. It's easy to put on in the morning, it doesn't go anywhere, you don't have to fiddle with it for a long time every time you go to the toilet. It's perfect. Now for the more sort of shapewear layer of my outfit, I've looked at a lot of different bras and bandeaus and girdles, and I've ended up going for what it's sometimes called a corselet, sometimes called corset brassiere, brassiere corset, lots of different names for this. It's a very simple garment, very straight down. It compresses the bust a little bit, and it just smooths out the torso, and it's also where you hang your stockings, so it does multiple things. And I think this is perfect for a domestic servant, because you wouldn't want your underwear to comprise of too many items that could sort of slip and slide and, you know, ride up or down and ruin your put togetherness throughout the day. So I think this will be great. Perfect. I will also be wearing a very simple slip on top of my corselet, just to smooth out any lines and make all the clothing hang nicely on top. Then it's on to my uniform. I've already talked to the other girls portraying servants, and we've decided to make our uniform dresses very similar. So very simple black cotton satin or cotton batistes, very sort of Simple 1 hour dress shapes with waist seam, drop waist seam, long sleeves, and I think will look very nice and very, very decent, all of us. I'll go with very sensible shoes for the uniforms, and we'll add a little bit of white in with all the black. The cap, the little lace thing that female servants wore on their heads, was absolutely hated in the period. So of course I'll have that, because I love silly headwear. And along with an apron and perhaps a little lace collar, I think this will look very nice and will look very prim and proper. So that's all that I have to have. But I want, now moving on to what I want to have. I would very much like to have a second outfit that can also pass as a uniform, because if I spill tomato soup all over me on the first night, I'm not in for a fun week. So I will be making a suit. I've been doing a lot of reading, and it seems like that's the kind of sensible thing to go for working women in the period. You want to look professional, you want to look put together, and you want something that can give you some variation. You get a suit. And with just the blouse and a skirt, the suit will look very uniformy. If I put an apron and cap on top of that, no one can tell the difference. But I will also make a suit jacket, and that will serve a dual purpose of both making me look very professional and nice in my little suit, and giving me a jacket to wear on top of anything and everything, because I've been to the location where we're staying before, and it's really cold there, so having just that extra layer to put on in the evenings will be absolutely perfect, I think. And then I have this very interesting book that's meant to teach young girls how to make dresses. And it is from 1929, the year that the event is set to. And I'd love to try and recreate one of those dresses for some sort of civilian clothing, civilian outfit. If I have the evening off, I want it to be clear to everyone that I'm not working, I'm not in my uniform. And I have this beautiful red rayon fabric, and I'd really love to try and make an afternoon dress out of it. So I think I'll try to do that. I want it to have little pleats. I want to wear it with some slightly less sensible shoes, and perhaps I'll even make a little cloche hat to go with it. Just to look nice. And then we're over to, the part of the program of things that I absolutely do not need, but would really, really love to try and make. I would like to make an evening dress. I don't know if a servant would own an evening dress. Possibly not. But I would very much like to own one. It's going to be very simple, black rayon, maybe some black glass beads at the hips and shoulders, but very, very, very simple. And maybe I'll find some excuse to wear it. If nothing else, I can always wear it to a party later, or I can dress it down with the suit jacket on top, or the blouse. And then, of course, I'll need a nightgown, and that book I mentioned also gives me instructions on how to make a nightgown. And on, you know, talking about things that I really don't need but really want, my mum is actually knitting me a 1920s bathing suit, and I'm so excited to try it on and try it in water and see how it works. And with that bathing suit and the nightgown, that really completes my little tiny servant capsule for 1929. Let me know what you think. Is this plausible? Is this doable? Are you having doubts? Are you excited? I'm excited. I'll come back very soon and we'll have a look at some underwear. But until then, bye! This is a very violent young boy. Ah! Hello. Say hi, Medwin. I love you, my little violent infant. Maybe that's why you're violent, because I keep calling you a skinfant.